Welcome to Equine-Assisted World. I'm your host, Rupert Isaacson, New York Times bestselling author of The Horse Boy, The Long Ride Home and The Healing Land. Before I jump in with today's guest, I just want to say a huge thank you to you, our audience, for helping to make this happen. I have a request. If you like what we do, please like, subscribe, tell a friend. It really helps us get this work done. As you might know from my books, I'm an autism dad. And over the last 20 years, we've developed several equine-assisted, neuroscience-backed certification programs. If you'd like to find out more about them, go to newtrailslearning.com. So without further ado, let's meet today's guest. Welcome back to Equine-Assisted World. With me today, I've got Catherine Ward and her daughter, Nicole Jones, who together run a pioneering place in Houston, Texas called 1 Acre Farm, where they do all kinds of miracles. So the reason why I want them on the show is a lot of us think of equine assisted stuff happening in large rural areas where we have a lot of space. 1 Acre Farm is just that. And it's within the city limits of Houston. And it's a bit of a groundbreaking concept. And it shows what really can be done with very little. So any of you think, well, I haven't got enough space, you kind of need to hear a little bit how Catherine and Nicole maximize what they've got and achieve results that are frankly quite breathtaking with kids. So welcome to the show, Catherine and Nicole. Please tell us who you are and what you do.
Hey, Rupert, thank you for having us. We're quite honored and excited to be with you. I'm Catherine Ward. We live about 35 miles north of Houston in Porter. I own and run 1 Acre Farm. And it started probably in 1999. Our very first class was how to raise chickens in your backyard. Because of our location where we are, while we're kind of rural, we're set in a very urban or very suburbanite type area. And so there are a lot of women that live in neighborhoods that want to have 4 or 5 chickens in their backyard. And so that was our goal to kind of get started there. Then we started classes for homeschoolers and Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts. And then fast forward from 1999 to 2016 when we met you, and then got our certification in Horseboy method and movement method and added that to all of our programs. And then fast forward to 2021, and we opened an outdoor farm school. And so now with all of the programs that we have, from Kids Art and Play, our Sensory Saturday, our private autism sessions, and our elementary farm school and our early childhood farm school, we service about 100 to 150 kids a month.
Impressive.
Thanks.
Okay, Nicole, who are you in this?
So I'm obviously daughter of Catherine. I'm a mom of 2, and my 2 kids come with me to the farm school that we run. I was a horsey kid. I was homeschooled all the way through. So I was homeschooled on a farm, very similar to how a lot of the kids that we work with today are being schooled, and had a lot of interaction with animals growing up, a lot of autonomy to my day, a lot of movement involved in my homeschooling and education growing up. And so currently I am the early childhood teacher at the school. And then also Catherine and I co-create curriculum together for things that we're doing on the farm and for other people who are interested in curriculum. But a lot of what got us, or at least got me to where we are with the school now, was the homeschooling background, a lot of the horsey stuff growing up. And then I was also an ABA therapist early on in my teaching days. I wanted to become a teacher. I got into ABA therapy, but very quickly realized it didn't sit right with me. I was there for about 2 years and just felt like there was something missing. I loved getting to have the relationship with children and being able to be one-on-one with kids and grow that relationship. But being a 19, 20, 21-year-old teacher, I was just still not knowing much and not being in the field very long. It just wasn't sitting right with my spirit, the things that I was being told to do, and feeling like the happiness of the children and the joy of early childhood education was just taken out of what we were doing. And it all was very clinical. It didn't have this, while we were building a relationship with kids, it just didn't have that fun aspect you would expect. And, you know, I was working with children who were nonverbal, who were poop smearers, eating their poop, all the way, that might be a morning student, and then an afternoon student was someone who could read and write and talking verbally. And so putting those two kids in the same class together, it was just, there was a lot of disconnect. And although I was working for a very highly regarded ABA clinic, I just felt like it wasn't sitting right with me. And so not too long in the field and just feeling like this isn't right, I need to find something else. I found Montessori education very happenstance. And so I was completing my college observation time you have to go to different schools and observe classes. And so I picked a Montessori school to go see because I just never heard of it and wanted to see what it was about, and walked in and was just, in 10 minutes, I was like, this is it. This was the thing. It was so similar to how I was homeschooled as far as the kids could walk around the class and pick things they wanted to do. There was interest-led learning. They could move around. They could go outdoors. They had this open space to their day of, all right, I can pick and choose what I want to do. And the teachers would pop in and out as they were needed and help direct the kids. But they had so much autonomy to what they were able to do. So that night I went home, decided I was going to get training in Montessori. I got certified the very next year. I went through my 1-year internship and 500 training hours or whatever and got that done, and then went into Montessori education. A couple of years into that is when Catherine and I went to Temple Grandin's speech and found you, and then had this whole other aspect added to, oh my gosh, here's where, while Montessori education was originally based in helping kids with special needs, there's this whole other aspect of the science I didn't understand, and that Dr. Montessori was also trying to understand. And, the neuro pathways that are formed and all of that with movement. Anyway, so we had all that added to it. And then COVID happened. We were doing some sessions with families, but then COVID happened and a lot changed with everybody. And Catherine and I decided, this might be the time we want to start something at 1 Acre Farm. And we did that. So I left my Montessori teaching job. We went into this together, and it's been really great since then. We just keep on trucking.
Right.
So you started, Nicole, with special ed, and as in America, as we know, a lot of people are funneled into applied behavioral analysis, ABA, and like many of us, you found it restrictive, coercive, and not joyful. Then you found Montessori, which is much closer in line with the autonomy. You've used that word. I want to return to that word. And why is autonomy important? That you'd experience, homeschooling or being homeschooled in nature. It's interesting that you were homeschooled because, Catherine, you have been a teacher in the regular school system, right? So
Yes.
Can you talk us a little bit through your background and career? How did you, as a regular teacher, then decide, well, actually, I want to homeschool? And then how have you brought those two things together into 1 Acre Farm, where you do have a school structure, but of course you're now using Montessori movement method and other modalities, all together? Can you just talk us through that trajectory, please?
Sure. Let me go back a little bit. So I was born in Texas, but raised in Louisiana. My mom remarried when I was very young. And it was a very unique upbringing because my stepfather was one of the richest men in town. So we lived in a huge mansion, but in our back acreage was all this livestock. So I was kind of raised in a farm lifestyle. I was also given that word, a lot of autonomy with being able to take care of animals. And my mom was very down to earth. And even though we lived such a lavish life, or we had access to that kind of wealth, she raised me in a very down to earth type mentality. So I'm very grateful for that. So that, I think, came to play later in life also, which we'll see the interconnection. So then I came back to Texas in 1987 and then started college. Well, I take that back. When I was in New Orleans, I started college, and my first major was psychology. No, my first major was marine biology, and then I changed to psychology, and then I changed to pre-med. So I wanted to go into medical school. And then we moved to Texas. I finished all of my pre-med and got accepted into UTMB of Galveston under their physical therapy program. And they had only, out of, how many hundreds of applicants, there were only 30 were accepted. And so I was accepted. And right then, before deciding to go to medical school, I changed my major again and went into education. And so I had to start my college pretty much all over again, went into education and graduated in early childhood or with elementary, pre-K to eighth, early childhood and reading specialization. And my love of farm animals and teaching just kind of combined. So when I was married, we had a little bit of acreage, and then Nicole was born to me, and then her sister Kristen. And it was even with my public school teaching. So after graduation, I did teach in the public school system for a few years. I taught kindergarten, first grade, and third grade. And then once I had children, I thought, oh my gosh, I don't want to be away from them. And I know what the system is like. And I know that they are going to be in this white room for 8 hours that I was in. And so it became a philosophical and somewhat of a faith decision, because I also felt like 8 hours away from us, that I wanted that influence on them spiritually and in their faith and in their philosophy. So the decision to homeschool was made. I left teaching, and then we homeschooled the girls their whole career for homeschooling. And as Nicole referred to, it was a very relaxed atmosphere. We spent hours and hours outside, and it was kind of naturally within me to want to follow their interest and follow what they were interested in. And I have so many squirrel moments. It's like, oh, look, there's a bug. Let's go look at that bug. So their homeschooling was very casual. Of course, we had some regimented things like you have to learn math. But for the most part, because both of the girls were interested in horses, I made sure that they could get horse lessons. And so while we couldn't afford those types of things, being on one income, we traded our work. So we would go and muck stalls. I think one of the places we went had like 23 stalls, and we would go every day and muck in the morning, 23 stalls, so that my girls could have lessons. And then we borrowed horses from other people so that they could then learn how to ride barrels. And we were very fortunate that other people were willing to work with us like that. So both of the girls were able to follow their interest with horses.
So you're there homeschooling, you are trading your work for riding lessons. You're doing it somewhat faith-based, but also because you just don't want to be away from them. I've got a question, which is that you mentioned having grown up very wealthy, but then you're now a one-income family where you need to trade mucking out for horse lessons. If you're a listener, you go, "Ooh, what happened there? What happened in that story? Where'd the money go? And how come you didn't sort of end up with that entitled attitude that you might have ended up with, growing up with money when the time came that you didn't have money anymore?" Talk us through those. What's the missing bit of that story?
The first loss of money was when my mom subsequently divorced my stepfather. And so then that family unit was no longer connected. In that split, they did split the business. They had several businesses. We had car dealerships. They built homes. They had a boat shop. He was into real estate. So there were all kinds of things within the many different cookie jars that were in there. And so my mom had to start off as a single mom with myself and my sister. And so in the divorce, she took over one of the boat shops. And over the next few years, she became one of the most renowned boat dealers in the United States because she was a woman. And she grew that one business into 3 more. So she took it from one location to 2 more locations, and kind of became a millionaire in her own right then. During that time, very sadly, my sister was killed in an airplane crash, a private airplane. And that completely changed our family, completely overnight. To watch my mother grieve so deeply, and then to watch my grandparents in their own grief, but then having to help support her and support me. And, when you look at your life as a timeline, my whole life until the birth of my 2 daughters, my life always had that dot in my timeline, as that was the anchor of my life before my sister died and after my sister died. And again, until Nicole and Kristen were born, that's how I measured my life. And it did forever change us, and it forever changed our outlook as a family and our connection. During that time, with my mom having a boat shop or a boat dealership, there were a couple of injuries that happened, like when you go to a boat show that's in a huge arena, someone tripped and fell and cut themselves and of course sued her. And then there were some other injuries. And so those lawsuits just totally demolished the business. It just destroyed the business. So we lost money then. She got out of the business and decided to go into real estate. And then she made herself a millionaire again. And during that time, a lot of people and her friends wanted her to co-sign for their own businesses. And she did. She was very generous. And then those would flop. And so she lost all of it again. And then that was when we decided in 1987, you know what, I'm going to go back to my roots. My mom would say this, I'm going to go back to my roots. Let's go back to Texas, and I'll go back to teaching, because she had been a school teacher before. So we came back to Texas and she went back to teaching. And then that's when I was entering college shortly after that.
Got it.
And then the lifestyle was just a very middle class lifestyle. And then when I got married, the same thing, just middle class.
Yeah. You mentioned, I mean, it's very interesting because it gives you multiple perspectives on life, to go from growing up wealthy to losing it all, to intense grief, to making it again, to seeing how business can be destroyed, and this is something which I think, a lot of business owners in America live justifiably in fear of, that day that somebody sues, business friendly country, but also business friendly for lawyers. Sadly, it can wipe people out, but it certainly, I think, gives you an interesting place of empathy where you can say, well, no matter who you're dealing with, I've lived that lifestyle. And at the end of the day, I know what's important. You talk about faith-based. Obviously, for my non-American listeners, when you're listening from a European perspective and you hear about, Christian homeschooling, one thinks of, armed compounds in the woods and, extremism, basically, and people being, homeschooled so that they won't learn about Darwin and that sort of thing. But your way of teaching at 1 Acre Farm is in no way like that. So when you talk about faith, I'd just like you to talk about how you guys consider yourselves Christians and how that works in an interplay, not just with science teaching, but also with, what values are, because again, many of us in Europe, we have a fear of religious extremism because all our history is learning about religious wars and witch burnings and things like that. And we don't want to go back there. And we don't want that kind of extremism. We sometimes see that coming out of the USA a little bit. But knowing you as I do, I know that's not you guys at all. So talk to me a little bit about how you weave your faith into what you do, because I think it's useful for us on the European perspective to consider this.
I think for me, I've gone through some transformations through the years, and I would say that there was a time that I was very tunnel visioned in that my philosophy was the only philosophy, or that the tenets of it are 100% the only way to think. But then, ironically, as I got exposed to the world, it was actually an aha moment when I was at your ranch in Elgin at a training for movement method and horseboy, where I met all these people from all over the world here at the ranch, and we were all learning movement method and horseboy. And I had gone there with such a thought process that I had already prejudged all these people before I had ever even met them. And I was now surrounded by people that were so highly intelligent and all had their own philosophies or faith. But the common thing that I saw was kindness and unconditional love, which are the tenets of Christianity. But I saw it in people that I would have never pinpointed as being the evangelical Christian type of Western Christian that we have. And that opened my mind to, wow, there is, to me, it became a universal truth in my heart that kindness is of the utmost importance. And so I came away from that and I started to do studies on ancient religions and stuff. And I found that through some of the basic first religions and even Native American, that the common tenet through all of that, one is that they all believe there is a creator, whatever, whoever that creator is, at least they acknowledge there's a creator. And then second to that was just kindness and unconditional love. And that I feel like every day when I wake up, that is what drives me every day, is to be kind to people. And I believe that as I see my daughters, both of them as adults, that they have such huge, kind and compassionate and empathic, empathetic hearts. I'm just very proud of them for being that way.
Yeah, it's, I think what often gets lost in religion is spirituality, because of course, as soon as you have a church or a temple or whatever one wants to call it, you usually have a bloke, standing there with a jar that you can put your money in. And it sort of goes from there. Whereas, of course, yes, one's relationship with the divine is one's relationship with the divine. And if there's a Christ message out there, I think, as you say, it's love thy neighbor.
Well, you had asked how we deal with that today at the school. And so we're not a faith-based school. We don't advertise ourselves as such. And I think that was a decision that Nicole and I made from the very beginning, that we did not want that. Not that we were turning our back on anything, but that is not what we wanted as defining us, and that we wanted to have an eclectic group of people and kids because we wanted the like-mindedness to be what is the goal of those parents for their children. And and those people can come from all walks of life. If the goal for their child is to be outdoors and to be free from institutionalized type classroom. And so we made that very conscious decision to not advertise ourselves as faith-based, because believe me, in this area where we are, it could have flourished even that way. But how I speak with our kids, because I'm the teacher of the elementary, ages 7 to 10, and so we really delve deep, and our subject matter is all of animal husbandry. So like, let's say we're talking about chickens, we're going to do the parts of the body, the digestive system, reproductive system, where did they originate, how did they migrate? And so we interconnect geography and history and all of the subjects, but studying chickens. And we'll talk about DNA, and especially in the reproductive system. And then a lot of times I'll tell the kids there are two basic ways to look at the world. You have one belief system that believes that everything was created by a creator. And then you have another that believes that everything was happenstance or through evolution. And I tell them, this is not where we discuss or debate that. What I want y'all to see how they can both be interconnected. There is science that supports both, and we're going to stay open-minded and look at the development of chickens or goats or whatever from that perspective, and see that there's probably bits of truth in both of it. And I want them to kind of just become their own independent thinkers. And the parents have always been very supportive and very appreciative that we approach science in that way with the kids.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about the need to, this word autonomy has come up, and of course autonomy is an intellectual process as well as deciding what I want to do from moment to moment. Nicole, why do you feel autonomy is so important in the development of a human? Talk to us about this.
I think this goes back to, as I was writing some things down as my mom was speaking, because her and I, it's been a while since we've talked about this subject, so I think this is good. I agree with a main goal of mine is to let kids be able to think for themselves, because the systems that we put them through tell them how to think, tell them what to do, tell them when to do it, and then they come out of the system and they don't know what to do. They don't know how to start a business. They don't know how to balance their bank accounts. They don't know how to take care of animals. Like these basic human, just everyday requirements that we have as adults that my friends at 30 still don't know how to do because they went through the public school. Like just those things that if you don't know how to do something, that you can go and figure out how to do it. So having that self-directed autonomy that homeschooling gives you, that farm schooling gives you, that movement method, those types of based educational methods give you, it doesn't matter what walk in life you're going to do. If you want to change careers, or if you decide to take a left turn somewhere, if you have those skills in, okay, I can do this and figure it out because I've had the autonomy and the practice of, I want to start a lemonade stand, or I want to figure out how I can afford to keep a horse for the year, those kinds of things, then you're going to be able to succeed in just about anything. And I think it's important to start that very, very young. I teach the kids ages 4 to 7, and these little 4-year-olds, and sometimes we have 3-year-olds, they're feeding the animals themselves. They come and tell us, like, that animal's poop looks different today than it did yesterday. Or do we need to check and make sure it's sick? Like, just those observational things that we have lost being out of nature. And so basically being able to allow kids to think for themselves and be those independent thinkers, and autonomy with your day gives you that. And it doesn't mean that we just let kids go and run around and do whatever they want to do. There's a boundary to, okay, you want to throw mud? That's fine. You can't throw it at other kids, but you can go throw mud at the fence, and you can figure out how far you can get it and who can get it farther. Does this mud stick to the tree? Does it not stick to this tree? And so we kind of approach everything with that. And that's based in our movement method training and horseboy training that we did years ago. It really kind of pieced together things that we were already doing and experienced and found very important, and just was that final piece to make it all connect and make sense. So
we use the word connect. So yeah, I mean, it's a well-known thing within psychology, as you guys both know, autonomy and connectedness, right? That's always, those seem to be the two fundamental human psychological social needs. We need enough autonomy that we feel self-actualized, and we need enough connectedness that we feel supported, connected. And why would that be? Well, we're herd animals at the end of the day. We're pack animals. We're middle tier predators. And our only way of being top predator is by talking to each other and strategizing. And the moment one of us ends up too autonomous, actually out on a limb, well, that's when the hyenas get you. But of course, not enough autonomy, well, then there's no innovation. And it seems that because in a hunting and gathering society, there are more opportunities for connectedness than there are for autonomy. In our evolution, our social evolution, autonomy has been a bit of a sort of a luxury, a novel thing. So we tend to seek it out in the same way that we seek out sweet foods or fatty foods, because in the wild, those are in somewhat short supply and they're nutrition packed and energy packed. So we're going to gravitate towards those. Now we've, got a society where that's kind of all that's on offer, and it's killing us, but we have a genetic drive for it. Like we have a genetic drive for autonomy. But one of the things which we can often see is that too much autonomy, oddly enough, can also stand in the way of happiness and success. And when the kids are working out what they want to do, how they want to spend their time, and making these decisions, you also, of course, are having to teach them about connectedness. How do you work with a group? And specifically, how do you seek out mentorship? How do you know what you don't know and go and find out about that, as you need it? Talk to them, how do you foster that in kids? I'll go back to you, Catherine, and then I want to come back to you as well, Nicole, on this. So the autonomy part, yes. Let's talk about the connectedness part.
Well, I think for autonomy, you can gain greater autonomy by the more you learn, the more skills you have, then give you more independence for other things. And so as the kids come in, we of course train them on the routines of what we have to do for caring for the animals. So in our outdoor school, it's a 5-hour school, and the first 2 to 2.5 hours is spent outside. When they arrive, the early childhood, what Nicole's over, and the elementary, they're given, an hour or so of time to just roam the farm, go play, connect with their friends.
This is at the start of the school day.
This is at the start of the school day.
The sort of 0 hour, if you like.
Yeah. So it's arrival, and it's time for them to transition from being home to now being here. Mm-hmm. And they're excited. I mean, they're social creatures. So of course they want to see their friends. And so we allow that. And we know from experience and from also our both of our backgrounds and our trainings, both formally with college and through movement method and so forth, that kids' brains just need time to adjust. So we give them that time, their freedom in the morning, and then we kind of regroup. And at the beginning of the school year, and then as the months go on, we're teaching them the skills of how to care for the animals. They're given farm jobs. Each child is given a farm job. When they reach up to elementary age, they're put together as teams. And so now as a team, they have to do a farm job. And it might be actually scooping poop, scooping the horse poop, putting it in the compost pile. And then we have another compost pile where they have to dig it and fill up manure bags, because we sell manure to the community to make money back to help pay for the food. I'll let Nicole speak about her early childhood kids. I don't want to step on your toes, Nicole. There is a lot of poop talk because we have so many animals and there's a lot of poop. But with that, they learn how to observe animals poop, lets them know immediately if an animal is sick. And so then we're able to tend to the animals. The skills of how to administer medications, how to muck stalls, how to just all the things that go surrounding taking care of the animals. But then we also give them skills on orienteering with compasses. We let them use tools. We let them dig holes. We let them be dirty. And then and we nature journal. We encourage them to do nature journaling. And then whatever subject matter we're learning, we try to encourage them to go find more things out. Like if we're talking about the chickens, well, then they'll do some observations with chickens or go and just hang out in the chicken pen and have some interactions. So there's all of that gets connected. And then as their skills grow, well, then they actually gain more independence. So by the time we get to later in the school year, well, they have more independence to go do projects on their own. And Nicole, you'll have to remind me, there's someone that has said, and I may mess up the quote, but where you allow children to do dangerous things carefully. Is that it? Danger?
Allow children to do dangerous things. I don't know.
Carefully
Basically, it's if they're doing it safely, like if they're doing it with enough caution, let them try, let them take the risk.
Yeah.
Is the point of the quote. Yeah.
And that's one of the things that we got, I think also
Richard Louv. It's either Richard Louv or Peter Gray.
My personality and Nicole's personality is very hands-off. We want kids to just explore and make mistakes. And what we've tried to do here at One Acre Farm is within the four walls of the privacy fence that we've provided a safe environment, that it can be a yes environment, which is what we learned from you. We did, I need to kind of go back. There was so much that we've learned from you and with you that I'd like to share with your listeners how we met. And so my daughter Nicole had gone into education and was into special education, and she wanted to go listen to Dr. Temple Grandin. And I said, oh my gosh, I want to go. I know of her because of her agricultural stuff. So we go to this place here in Houston to go listen to Temple. And it's much like when you go to a music concert, you're going to hear the headlining musician or the headlining band, but then you have the little opening act beforehand. So you were the opening act, and you walk out on the stage and you looked like you had just walked off the ranch. You had your jeans.
I probably had.
You probably had. Yeah, you've got your long hair. I mean, your signature look that you have. And I turned and I looked at my daughter and I kind of rolled my eyes, honestly. You hadn't even opened your mouth yet. And I rolled my eyes.
I don't think you're the first person to have had that happen to me.
And I looked at her and said, oh my gosh, we have to listen to this guy before Temple comes on. And she's like, it'll be okay, Mama. He probably won't talk that long. So,
didn't know me that well yet. Yeah.
But then your mouth opened, you started speaking, you started sharing your story of Rowan, you started sharing the things that you did to help him and how movement method and horse boy were all developed. And the whole time, Nicole and I are both elbowing each other because everything that came out of your mouth was exactly how we homeschooled and how they were raised. And I just kept it was almost like some people when they talk about going to church and that God is talking to them, that there's that light shining. So I felt like—
I don't think anyone's made that comparison to me before.
But I did. And I felt like, oh my gosh, this guy is speaking right to me. And now I knew that because I had spent so many years feeling alone because there was
Mm.
nobody else around me homeschooling like this. And we were just kind of the oddballs in the homeschooling community. So now fast forward, she's an adult. We're listening to you. And now I didn't want you to stop speaking. I wanted to keep hearing you. And of course, we were very grateful to hear Dr. Temple also. But afterwards, we made a beeline to go meet you, buy a book, and then she and I signed up to come to training at your place
Went to
within,
the
I
ranch
think,
that summer. It was like just a couple months later. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And it was just so edifying to now find that what we had been doing all along had a name, or it had science behind it, because you obviously have done all the science research for it. So it was a very comfortable place. It was like, this is the very next step that our life needs to take. And at the end of, and I've heard you do this because I've seen you speak many times, and when you encourage people to use their life and what they have to include people with autism into their life, you made it very clear that you may think you're going to be imparting something to them, but what in fact actually happens is that you receive so much more from that person with autism that they give back to you, and that they are the dream givers. And that's exactly what happened. So I came back from training and everything else, and we were like, this is the next step for One Acre Farm. So from 1999 to 2016, we had been doing all of these classes. And then it was like, no, this is the next step. We are going to become inclusive with all of our activities, and we're going to start private autism sessions. And we have never looked back from that decision, ever. So thank you, Rupert, for that.
Oh, it's my great pleasure. I mean, where we're talking about connectivity, connection, connectedness, I think a lot of us started in this place, and I'm sure most listeners who are equine-assisted practitioners started in this place, or might still be in this place of loneliness. When you tread a bit of a pioneering path, it's lonely. And when you're a special needs parent with a non-verbal kid, it's lonely because you're not really talking, and there's a lot of loneliness. And so for me, I know the great gift, one of the many great gifts of doing this work, has been the connectedness of community with people like you all, and like with the people who are listening to this. So to realize, oh my gosh, we actually are all one tribe. We actually are all one community. It's just that we're a little bit spread out geographically from each other, but we have community. We're out there. And listening to you between the lines, talking about this sort of 0 hour where the kids come in and get to socialize move and socialize and explore together before they have to sit down and listen to old, boring adult, saying, okay, now let's look at the DNA of chickens. Interesting as that is, the fact that they're allowed to have their time to not just transition into the school day, but also to explore their own connection and community. And then you begin to organize them in teams. This is actually quite groundbreaking, because yes, you hear about project-based education. It's coming in more and more in the mainstream, but it's, we all know that unless you have a teacher that really has that personality, it's likely to be a little bit lip service. You guys really do it. Can you, Nicole, talk to me about connectedness, and how do you encourage kids? Because you're encouraging them to be independent minded, but you also need to encourage them to learn how to seek out information, right? Who to ask, who to research, just because somebody says something doesn't mean it's necessarily true. How do you approach all that?
Well, I think we have a couple of really good things working for us. One being, we have the multi-age range. So my class is ages 4 to 7. Catherine's class is ages 7 to 10. That comes back being based in the Montessori practices of having a 3-year age range and the importance in that. And so now we do have a small class size. The early childhood class goes up to about 13, and then elementary fluctuates anywhere from 13 to 16, roundabout, per day. Now that we will have more students than that during the week, because some come partial week and some come the full week, but in a given day, it's 13 to 16 kids per class. So in that 13 kids, we've got a third are the oldest, or a third are the middle, and a third are the youngest, typically is how it would go. So whenever we start a school year, we're not getting this influx of brand new children, a class of brand new children. It's 60% of the kids are still retained from the following year or from the previous year. And the new kids coming on are learning from the kids who are already
So there's there's age to age
Yes,
peer-to-peer
absolutely.
mentorship within
Yes.
the children. Yeah, got it.
Yeah.
If you're in the equine-assisted field, or if you're considering a career in the equine-assisted field, you might want to consider taking one of our 3 neuroscience-backed equine-assisted programs. Horseboy Method, now established for 20 years, is the original equine-assisted program specifically designed for autism, mentored by and developed in conjunction with Dr. Temple Grandin and many other neuroscientists. We work in the saddle with younger children, helping them create oxytocin in their bodies and neuroplasticity in the brain. It works incredibly well. It's now in about 40 countries. Check it out. If you're working without horses, you might want to look at movement method, which gets a very, very similar effect, but can also be applied in schools, in homes. If you're working with families, you can give them really tangible exercises to do at home that will create neuroplasticity when they're not with you. Finally, we have taquine equine integration. If you know anything about our programs, you know that we need a really high standard of horsemanship in order to create the oxytocin in the body of the person that we're working with, child or adult. So this means we need to train a horse in collection, but this also has a really beneficial effect on the horse's well-being. And it also ends your time conflict where you're wondering, oh my gosh, how am I going to condition my horses and maintain them and give them what they need, as well as serving my clients? Taquine equine integration, aimed at a more adult client base, absolutely gives you this.
So, 5 and 6-year-olds are teaching 3 and 4-year-olds how to observe body
Operate
language of
heavy
animals.
equipment.
And,
Okay.
yeah, no, not yet. No, not yet. How to feed the animals. Well, you can't pull that in the garden. That's an herb. We don't pull that one, but you can pull this weed and go give it to the goats. So all of those things that, while us as teachers could interject more, we don't want to. We would have to be doing that if we didn't have that kind of peer modeling and mentorship going on. And it's not only good for the younger kids who get that peer-to-peer learning, but it's so beneficial for the oldest kids in the classroom that then are building those leadership skills. And we start to see, especially that 3rd year, and this is true of Montessori classrooms as well, we see those kids in that 3rd year start to really emerge as leaders because, they've been through learning from other kids, they've learned from us. That 2nd year is a lot more experimental in what they do and the boundaries they push and that sort of thing. And that 3rd year, we get like these really great leaders that know how everything works on the farm. They're like the cool kids because they know where all the cool spots are. And, I know where to find this plant and I know where to get this. And so all these younger kids come to them and they get to pass that on to the other kids. So we already, with just the multi-ages, get that sense of community building from kids just asking each other questions and kids wanting to help. And we do have a very good retention rate. We don't lose very many students. Most of them tend to stay with us. Typically, where we lose students the most is that kindergarten or 1st grade year. The families that come to us that are like, I just want something for a couple of years before we send them to public. We do get that and we understand that. But the majority of our kids tend to retain and stay with us and then move up to the elementary class. So we're now in this year was really cool because this was the first year that we had kids go all the way through the 3 years in the early childhood class and then graduate up to elementary. And we've seen this cool change happen from our pilot year to now where we've just got these kids that have, I don't want to say more common sense, but more farm common sense because they've been with us for these 3 years and they know how everything works. And they're able to go deeper into their questions. While they may have studied chickens and horses and pollination and composting in the early childhood class, well, now they get to dive even deeper in elementary and go way more into how this all works at a science-based level and not just, this is a cool lesson. And so we already get that building of community just through the information sharing and the way they structure their day. Our class tends to get really connected really quickly. It's a different class in August at the start of the school year than it is in December. usually around November, December, we've seen the friendships deepen a lot. The kids have learned how the schedule of the day works, how much freedom they have, because a lot of times those new kids that come in, they have not spent a lot of time outdoors. Half of our kids have never even had pets of any kind. I mean, not even a fish. That's so a big chunk of our kids come, and this is the first time they've ever been around animals at all. So we do a lot of working with observing and reading body language of animals, the sounds they make, and a lot of the older kids will help the younger ones learn that as well. And so anyway, by the time we get to November, December, our class has really normalized, and we're not having to step in as much. We are really able to take a step back a lot and just watch the children spend their time on the farm and get into their projects and observe an anthill for 20 minutes, go bird watching. I mean, we have birds that build nests right next to the classroom, and then we get to hear the owls in the woods behind us. So they all go off and do their things, and they play tag and do their games, but there's also so much immersive nature involved in it that the children that are interested in similar things tend to pair up and do things together. And so the friendships grow really quick. And by November, December, we've got a really, really solid and connected class.
To bounce off of something that she said about some of the kids that we lose that go to public school at kindergarten or first grade, they will come because our school we actually go year round. So we do a regular 10-month from August to May, but then we have a summer session. And so those kids have all come back every summer to do their 2 months of summer farm school in between. One of the students, I don't remember if it was our pilot year or our second year, Nicole, but we had a mom come to us in tears. So this was during our interview process of her wanting to enroll her child. And she was crying because her child had already been kicked out of 3 other preschools, kicked out of preschool. And
For what?
For moving
for
around
moving,
and not napping,
not sitting
and
down.
that
Yeah.
sort of thing.
And so
Being a kid, basically.
just being a kid. And so it didn't, now while Nicole and I, we didn't show this to her, but we're shocked at the fact that a preschool would even kick a kid out. That was our shock. Our shock wasn't about the behavior. And so she's like, you're going to take him? And we're like, yeah, sure. You're not afraid? No, we're not afraid. No. And do you know that we never, not once, had any problems with him. He needed that movement and all of that stuff. And so I think there are some kids that can conform. I don't think they perform at their top level, but there are also going to be those kids that just cannot conform to an institutionalized classroom. And so they did send him on to public school after he finished with us. But he comes back every summer.
And you don't have to tell him how to feed the goats, and he remembers from the year before, and so it has stuck with him. So it's been nice to be able to see those kids come back and see how much that this place has meant to them and how it stuck with them even 3-4 years later.
Yep.
So that's a unique thing that I don't know of any other school that does that. Because even Montessori schools won't take kids during the summer that have been previous students. So it's kind of a unique thing we get to experience.
Yeah, you guys are gluttons for punishment because you get no
breaks.
No,
none. And I think too, for that child, because we have other kids that have gone on to public school. Actually, we had one that went on to public school and then they took them out and brought them back to farm school because they were not performing well at all. And the kid just really wanted to be back at farm school. But like with the ones that do go on, the ones that do go on, I think the amount of time that they've been given to become independent and autonomous, and the confidence that they get from learning the skills. And I think they also learn patience. There are a lot of things that just stroke their personality, that they now have the skills to conform to those demands of an institutional classroom.
What's interesting, what sounds like what you're describing is the teaching of emotional intelligence. And, we all know, academics are one thing, and we'll get into the academics you deliver and how you deliver them next. But listening to you talk makes me think of a really great movement method teacher that we know in Colorado, Cade, who teaches at Evans Elementary in Colorado Springs. And he says that after about, and this is very much within the, the regular system, but of course he's taking the same approach. He says that by the time the kids are about 10 weeks in, their brains have developed to such a degree through the movement and the project-based thing and the mutual support that they go from the standard sort of them and us teacher, children versus the teacher thing, because that's obviously what they've, come in with, to being able to go off and learn independently in small groups in other parts of the school. And he says, I send out my little spies, to see what are they actually doing it, and yes, they are. That it's like he says the brain development. Like you have a different child after 10 weeks. The neuroplasticity has really kicked in, and we see this time and again. But he's not able to work, as you are, because your campus is your own and you have the animals and so forth. Talk to me about the academics that you deliver. So if I was a parent, say, well, this all sounds great, guys, but I want my kid to go on and get their SATs, or if it was in England, it would be their GCSEs or whatever, and I want them to get on to college and so on. Can you really tell me that this way you're going to deliver the national curriculum this way? I imagine that you're going to say, well, yeah, sure. But tell me the nuts and bolts of how. So Nicole, I'll throw that one to you first. I'm the skeptical parent. Well, this all sounds great, but it sounds also a bit hippie. Okay, hippies actually rule the world, but hey, how can you reassure me that you're going to equip my child academically in the same way as if they were in the public school?
Yeah. Well, usually when I start out, parents typically will meet me at a tour. And so we walk them through the farm, the classroom, go over the educational philosophy, and go over the curriculum. And so at some point in there, I will throw in, I was homeschooled right here in this community, right next door to the farm. And I turned out to be a normal human being. I went to college. I graduated high school with college credits, so like it first of all, you're talking to somebody who's proof in the pudding, right? So
Right.
I've
You
already
are
been
the
through it and
proof
done
of
it.
concept. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And so here we are just creating this for, while I did it at a family level, here we are creating this for a classroom, small class size level. And so starting off with that, when people find out, oh, you were actually homeschooled and you went, yeah, okay, it eases the conversation a little bit. But then when we walk through the indoor portion of class, because the kids do spend 2.5 hours outside before we even go in for any kind of academics. And then even when we go inside, they're eating first, washing their hands, getting some movement out a little bit more before we even sit and do any kind of a lesson. And so our classroom, the early childhood classroom, is set up as you would see a typical Montessori classroom. So we have fine motor work, practical life, all the things to help develop the hand for writing. We've got sensorial work, which is working with a lot of pieces, discrimination, objects, and things like that, math, language, and science. And our science and geography changes monthly depending on what we're studying and what the seasons bring us. So while we advertise we are supplemental curriculum to what you're doing at home, we really do teach a full curriculum in that 2.5 hours that they're indoors. And I've had classes with as many as 40 kids. And in that 2.5 hours, I get more done with those 13 kids than I ever got done in 8 hours, even in a Montessori setting. And our parents do get a pretty comprehensive progress report twice a year of things that they're doing. And so they can look at those things and match it to, in Texas, we have the TEKS. That's our Texas educational code of what they're learning as far as math and reading and things goes. But we can teach anything from early numeracy and learning letter sounds to, writing sentences and writing stories to long division. And so because we also have the flexibility to be able to make curriculum as we need it, I've had some years, I've had a 6-year-old that was at like a 4th grade reading level. And so I just made things that she needed and got in for, what she was on level for. And we're able to adapt what the kids need. And so because it's a Montessori classroom that's already set up for your age range of about 3 years of an age range, while it may look like how can you fit 3 years of curriculum in here, the materials that we're using and the curriculum that we create is so flexible in what we can do with them that we can be using this for, a 4-year-old and then also be using this for a 7-year-old in long division and multiplication. So the materials are very comprehensive in what we're able to offer to them. So usually once we go through the curriculum areas and that sort of thing, that we don't have too many skeptics after that. But typically, we do have those people where it just doesn't fit with them, and that's fine. We don't want them to come if that's not what they're about. But typically the people that seek us out are wanting the small class size, the movement, the outdoors, the animals. That typically is what the families that come to us, that's one of the things that they're wanting. And the families that get the most out of this are the ones that have academics lower on their list. Because as we all know, everything that they do outdoors, as far as the autonomy, going back to that creates so much executive functioning skills that, okay, if you've had 2 hours outside to be autonomous in what you want to do with your day, well, then when you get this big, huge math problem, you now have the executive functioning skills to go through this math problem that might take you 20, 30 minutes. Whereas if I was leading you through your day and I don't know how to get this math problem done, I need a teacher to sit here and tell me step by step. So we try, and it's a lot of educating parents, because a lot of them already have a feeling of, okay, I feel like this is right, but I don't know why. Like I don't know how to justify it. And so once we're able to go through the science of it and show proof of concept, we really get a lot of people that just, they take a breath. Okay, this is gonna be fine. And then the ones that aren't attracted to those kinds of things, we send them off. We don't want we don't want them in our program.
Give me a concrete example. Let's say I'm a kid and I'm having trouble with long division. How would you set up my day? Like, I'm sure you're strategizing, right? Think, okay, Rupert's got trouble with long division, so we're going to start his day like this, and then we're going to look at this thing with animals, we're going to look at this thing with the horse, we're going to look at this thing with the plants. And then once I am inside and I've gone through that, and now I'm faced with the long division exercise, how do you present it to me and how do you help me through? So can you talk me through the day from start to finish? You've got your eye on me. Okay, Root needs help with the long division. Off we go.
Yeah. So I want to make sure, if I know that a kid's been struggling with something in particular, I want to make sure that they've gotten the opportunity to get the movement out in the morning. We have 4 different types of swings on the farm, so we try to make sure kids have opportunity for swinging. I tend to find a lot of the kids that struggle with reading will tend to be on the swing more. I don't know if that's a specific connection. It's just an observation that I've had. And so I don't know if it has to do with those oral skills and things like that, but I tend to see that. So we want to make sure they've done what they want outside. They've gotten their movement out. They've spent lots of time with the animals. Usually that will really help if they can go spend more time with the goats or the chickens or the rabbits. It tends to calm the nervous system down before we go indoors. So I want to hopefully see them get some animal time as well, and not just the running and energetic stuff. So that tends to help. And then by the time we go indoors, we don't structure a kid's day and that, okay, you have to start and we're immediately going to do this math problem that you hate. Once kids in the early childhood class reach about 6 years old, they actually get a work plan for the week. And so it's, here's your things that you have to accomplish this week. You can pick Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and you get to structure your week as you see fit. Now, that doesn't mean that because you have handwriting and reading this book with me and long division and multiplication that you have to do that all first. We allow for some art time or something else before we get to that. So it's more on the teachers to go, okay, let me observe and kind of help push them and guide them to get it done when we know it's about time. But we're still making sure that they have time for that autonomy and get those things done. So when it comes to that long division problem, maybe they didn't want to do it on Monday. Maybe it's coming up on Wednesday. So I know on Wednesday, I need to make sure that around 11:30, we're going to get started with that long division problem. One of the things that's unique about Montessori materials, especially in the math curriculum, is everything is concrete. Nothing is done on paper first. Everything is done with very physical materials first before you ever get to anything on paper. And that's also something we have to explain, is that to parents, you're not going to see a lot of work come home. And while that may to you look like, oh my gosh, my kid didn't do anything academic because it didn't come home on paper, it's because we're using the physical materials in school. And they might not be at the point where they're writing it down on paper yet, because that's a little bit too abstract. Now, eventually we get to that, but we're working with place value. So the unit bead, the 10 bar, the 100 square, the 1,000 cube. So they're understanding quantities and place values before we get to those really hard problems on paper. So they start doing addition, subtraction, multiplication, division with the quantities before it ever gets onto paper. So then by the time they're really familiar with that, well, then we can actually start doing it on paper with the materials, because by then they're already starting to get it. And these kids will already start to visualize the math in their head. And it's when they get about to the point where they're no longer using the materials that they're just telling you, oh, I know the answer is 2,192. Well, then, okay, we're ready for paper now. We can get rid of that and go to paper. And so a lot of it is the preparatory work for the day, just making sure they've had their outlet for sensory and movement needs. And then they also have autonomy of when they do those really hard things that they may not like. Now, it's not that I say, okay, well, you get to do whatever you want this week. You do have to get these certain things done, because we do need to ensure you are getting reading done, you are getting your math done. But there's avenues in which way you can choose to get that done. So maybe we're not reading a book. Maybe we're matching parts of a story. So we have a book with sentences and they have to match pictures to the correct page, or we're matching pictures to words. So there's different reading aspects we can do. We've also got where they have to read an activity. And so then it's like, go jump on a rug. So then they go jump on a rug. Okay, go find a cup. And so then we've got movement involved in the reading, and they're moving around the classroom, but they're still doing reading. So those are the kinds of things that we kind of add into the class to make it work. I don't know if that answers.
No, it totally makes sense.
Okay.
And I think it's really useful to have this broken down for people, because, and I know we've gone through this process of having to learn to become educators. I did it kicking and screaming. I didn't want to be. I just kind of had to. And then how to break these things down, as you say, doing it with physical things, and then moving from physical things with moving, because when you use physical things, you are still moving.
Right.
And then to the abstract. And then, as you say, making sure that the sensory and physical needs are met first. And as you know, with movement method, we sort of sprinkle the concepts into the movement long before we ask a kid to tackle an exercise, if you like. And I know with Montessori it's very similar. Catherine, when you are now dealing with the elementary kids and it's getting a little bit more academic based, again, how and this kid is going to have to, at this stage, transition back into something more mainstream by the time they hit middle school or high school. So you have that presumably in your mind. Okay, I have to prepare these kids to be able to thrive when they don't have the luxury of 1 acre farm. What are your strategies for making sure that transition happens, at least academically, relatively seamlessly?
I would first say that most of our elementary kids are, obviously because of their age, they're being homeschooled. Most of them continue to be homeschooled even after they're done with.
Okay, so you're like the homeschooling backup. They would consider sending them to 1 acre farm, even though it's a school, as part of homeschooling, even though it's actually sort of isn't really homeschooling. But okay, right. I see what in those parents' mind it comes under that banner.
Yes. Well, and Nicole said the word earlier that we're supplemental. So we don't advertise and say we are a full curriculum school. We are supplemental education. Right. So now, while the early childhood that Nicole is over is a full 4-day program, some kids only go 2 days. The elementary is not offered all 4 days. For right now, we've chosen just 2 days out of the week, mainly because our philosophy of thinking is that, well, if you have a child at home age 7 to 10, you've chosen to homeschool. So the bulk of their academics are going to be taught at home. And so we're supplemental. So they come to us for 2 days out of the week. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't focus on academics. We certainly do interconnect them, but we're not providing a full math curriculum or a full language arts curriculum. So our elementary is more focused on the sciences of all of the animals, animal husbandry. But within the studying of those animals and gardening, we bring in reading, because they then have to read books, do book reports. We bring in geography and history because we study the migration of animals, whether it was natural or through explorers. But through that, my main focus, because they think it's fun. At this point, a book report is not something they roll their eyes at. They're excited to write something about chickens. And we take it much like Nicole describes, taking things in steps. We start off teaching them observation skills when they're outside. We want them to observe. And then with nature journaling, what are you observing? Write that down. What are some, and if they're not writers yet, then we'll write for them as they dictate. What are the adjectives? We want them to become more creative in their writing as they observe. So then when they come inside, then they can take those skills and I really try to give them observation skills of what are they observing in the books and how to express yourself in writing, how to write complete thoughts within sentences. And so they come to that. So my focus is studying about the animals. I'm not trying to get them a vet degree, but it is a means to an end, I guess. So we use the animals and their interest in all of that to get those other subjects in. And so hopefully when they're done, if they leave us at age 10, then they've got those writing skills and those research skills and those things that they need as a foundation to transition into middle school, whether it's institutionalized or at home. And so right now, the way we have the curriculum set up, the parents don't come in expecting that they're going to be getting algebra or pre-algebra or any of that. They're very accepting of the curriculum that we provide.
Would you rise to the challenge of doing algebra and pre-algebra?
I would. You and I have had these conversations. I would have to take a refresher course myself a little bit. But one thing I will say that we've added this year because every year we tend to kick it up a notch. We add more and we make the program a lot more flourishing. And so this year, while it doesn't have to do with algebra, we are doing a presentation project. So the kids, in fact, we're on spring break right now. They come back next week and they're going to spend about 5 weeks in teams with a subject matter. And then we're going to have a presentation night where all the families at the farm school are invited in, and they're going to have these display boards and be able to give speeches and talk about their display and the things that they've learned. And so that's something we've never done in the elementary program before. So we're adding that this year. And we have discussed, I can tell you that probably half of our parents in the elementary ask, when are you going to offer a 4-day? Because they would send their child here for the whole 4 days. Nicole and I just have not made it to that decision level yet. There's a lot of working
I'm sure that's
parts.
a staffing issue too. Yeah.
It's very much so, because the other 2 days that I'm not teaching, well, that's when I'm on the tractor doing tractor work or fence repairs. So if I now then had to teach 4 days and I'm still
and
doing
then the autism sessions as well.
Right. Yeah. So when school is over in the afternoon, I'm doing private autism sessions. So unless you can find a doctor to clone a me, yeah. So it's a logistical staffing issue to not expand that more. But yes, we do have visions of expanding and possibly expanding curriculum. We're just not there yet.
Well, you'll be pleased to know I'm on it as well, because those people that know movement method in our math and science curriculums know that I don't write those because I'm not qualified to. So I could figure out the very early basic stuff with homeschooling. But as you guys know, we turned to an amazing man called Dr. Alfred Ziegler, who he's retired from there now, but he was a physics professor at the University of Osnabrück, which is a very prestigious university in Germany. And he came up with all our higher math and science movement method curriculum. And so I've just been making a little note to myself here. I'll go back to Dr. Alfie for our kinetic algebra stuff, please. So I'm going to ask him for those. And I'll probably do that in the next week or two. And then I'll then circulate that to you all to use as you wish.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Because it's hard to come up with these things by oneself. And I think that's one of the difficulties about homeschooling when I'm advising people is say, don't think of homeschooling as you and your kids sitting at a table, both driving each other nuts, both wanting to kill each other and yourselves. No. You've got to reach out for mentorship yourself. Get the curriculum from people that know how to do the curriculum and build a team, whatever that looks like, so that it's not just about maybe that person can teach that subject better, but also it's the socialization thing. We need more than one personality involved. We need, and then, as you say, where are those collective homeschool groups so that they can have the socialization with the other kids as well? And you guys, of course, have done something rather remarkable, which is to corral that into one dedicated physical location, rather than having to do, a homeschool group, session here, homeschool session over there, in that household, that household, that household. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it's just logistically easier for families, I think, and nice also for a kid to have a campus. So you mentioned the staffing issues. How many people are there working now currently? And I'm sure you're under pressure to expand, and I'm sure you're also under pressure to move into middle high school.
Yes.
What are your plans for that?
We certainly talk about it a lot. I don't, so your listeners may not know this. You said something earlier about doing with what you have. And I am a self-proclaimed, I am the queen of, I make do with what I've got. When my girls wanted to show animals for 4-H and we didn't have a pickup truck, we had a family van. I have shoved pigs and goats in the back of the family van because that's what my girls wanted to do. So that has been constant in my personality. And so with 1 acre farm, we truly are 1 acre, and I have fit into that 1 acre as much as we can over the last 25 years or so. And then when Nicole and I, when we had talked about opening a school, every time that I would approach the state about it, they wouldn't approve it. Oddly enough, one of the reasons they didn't want to approve a school is because they didn't want to have a mix of animals and kids. And so how we were eventually able to start the farm school, it's actually considered under the category of learning pod, is that when COVID happened and all the schools closed, pretty much everybody became a homeschooler. And so the state of Texas then redefined the definition of school, and they came up with learning pod. And so the very people that had declined me contacted me and pretty much said, guess what? We have this place, this category of an umbrella that you can exist. So that's how we then said, guess what? We're going to go ahead and open up. As far as growth and expansion, when we started, it was going to be outdoors only the whole time, but then we quickly realized there needed to be some type of indoor portion.
And that's a tall order in the Houston climate where it gets.
Oh, it is. Well, and
yeah,
not just for the comfort of the students and the teachers, but also resources.
Yeah.
I have had so many books ruin in my outdoor classroom, even though I have a bookshelf, because of the humidity, and they just mold and so forth.
Yeah.
So I'm very, very fortunate in the structure of my home that it has two large living rooms. And so one living room at the back of the house is attached to the kitchen. It's one huge space. And again, when we started the farm school, it was only the early childhood. We had not started the elementary yet. So I took out all of my living room furniture. That was no longer a living room, and we created a classroom in there. So that's where Nicole's early childhood is. And there's just bookshelves and all of their work trays and the rugs. And so we've got a small Montessori inspired classroom there. And so then I was, again, the queen of make do. So we made do. It's no longer a personal space. That's now an indoor classroom. We thought parents would, now some parents come in thinking, this is a little weird, but then other parents embrace it and love it. And I'm so encouraged because my mother was a teacher at some point. My grandmother was a teacher, and my great-grandmother was a teacher. And I remember my grandmother opened up a kindergarten in half of her house. So I just kind of felt like this is all natural and normal to me to put a classroom in your house. Then when we added the elementary, we did have it strictly outdoors the whole time the first year. And then that's when a lot of our resources were just ruining I'd put them in Ziploc bags. I'd do whatever I could to protect them, but the humidity was just awful on the resources. So then I have another humongous living room that Nicole and I said, you know what? Well, what if we just kind of divided that room in half? So half of it still has my TV and my sofa so that I can, enjoy watching something if I want to. And then the other half is now bookshelves and classroom. I have something very unique that my grandfather and my father built, a huge 12-foot oak table as when I was a child, I still have that table. So that is the table in the classroom, but it's also our family table where we gather on Sundays. So that room has become very dual purpose, from using it as a classroom and then using it for my own personal space. Our goal right now and in our fundraising is to try to raise money so that we can actually build a 2-room schoolhouse on the farm property and remove it from the home and into a classroom. So there's that expansion.
Well, you know what happened with that? You'll just end up with 4 classroons. The 2 ones in the house will stay, and then you'll just have 2 extra ones in the new structure. Yeah.
I
Then
know.
it goes back to a staffing problem after.
Right. Then the staff, the staffing. So Nicole is the lead teacher. I'm the lead teacher. And then she and I both have assistants. And the demographic of the class, out of my 16 students, 4 to 5 are neurodivergent. We have a couple of them that do need shadows because of communication. So while they are not staff, my staff, they are 2 other adults that are there, but their attention is supposed to be specifically for those nonverbal kids there. And then, so it's really just 2 teachers and 2 assistants. It can be hard. Like when we've lost teachers before, like we had one that ended up moving, and I think, Nicole, what was it? We went through like 6 applicants or something.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's a set of skills that not everyone can.
Yeah. And I would say each one of them like came for a day, and then they're like, yeah, this isn't for us, because it is, you've got to love kids, love animals, want to understand the yes environment. There are a lot of people that cannot comprehend and accept the freedom and the autonomy that the kids have. And then you got to be okay with being dirty. And so the finding a person that has that perfect storm can be very, very, very difficult to find.
Yeah.
Nicole, you were going to say something.
Yeah, well, I was going to say exactly what you said. The being outdoors, even, for 2 to 3 hours at a time in our climate, especially in the summer, it just, people are like, nope, I can't do it. And even though they might be on board with everything else, that's something that keeps them away. So
yeah, I think your climate is particularly extreme. Yeah. How do you fund it? So obviously people pay to send their kids to you, but you can only have a certain number of kids because you're a certain number of people, you've got a certain amount of space. So what, outside of the actual school fees that you charge, how do you fund what you do?
The school programs are very fortunate that they do fund the programs completely. And then the other programs that we have during the week or during the month, like the story time and the autism sessions and the kids art and play, those programs also funnel money into it. So as far as, paying the feed bill and paying salaries and that kind of stuff is all covered there. What becomes a challenge is the huge chunks of money that we need for like a new classroom or something. Before we had the elementary, I was a lot more connected in going to all of the Chamber of Commerce meetings. And in the evenings, I would go and speak to different community groups and stuff. But now that the administrative duties and the teaching duties and everything else, my time is just so stretched. I have now been so disconnected from being able to be out there presenting it to the community for those kinds of donations. And so while we do fund our projects, like we had a hurricane came through and blew down all of our fencing. And so we've been having to rebuild fencing. We've been able to take care of that stuff. But as far as growth for taking on another staff member or taking on an assistant for me, because we have a waiting list for families of children with autism, and we just can't help everybody. And if I could know that I had the funding to pay somebody, then I could go ahead and train someone to be an assistant and take on more clients there. And then also the funding for the classroom. And so we have all of that, and we speak it out in positive vibes to the universe and prayers to God, and we just keep doing, whether it's going to happen quickly or not. We just, like I said, we make do with what we have, and we just keep pushing on and looking to grow as we can do it.
Well, in the years I've known you, I've never seen you guys not do it. So I think you guys are, absolutely will continue to thrive. One of the things I've always thought is what is needed is a ton of little 1 acre farm campuses dotted around
Yeah.
all over the world, really. Are you beginning to think about how to train people to put together what you do? Because it's very specific. Like, we go and do movement method trainings or horse method trainings, and then we say to people, here's the framework, use it in your context the way you want to use it. But with you, it's even more complex, because you're really taking on the academic responsibility. We supplement, we show people how to homeschool, we train schools how to use movement method, we give them the lesson plans and so on. But it's really us training professionals who are already doing it. You guys are the professionals. If somebody wanted, that's maybe they're sitting in the Netherlands listening to this, or somewhere, places where space is at a premium, or any given suburban environment like yours, are you gonna put together a framework for trainees? Can people contact you for that?
We do. We are in the works on that. And it's a continuing, evolving thing as we do it. And the more we do it, the more we're like, oh, we need to do this too. And so Nicole and I, you had told us a long time ago, you just wait. People are going to be seeking y'all out. And I thought, yeah, they're not going to know anything about One Acre Farm. But sure enough, we have people that seek us out from all over the place. So Nicole and I are now doing consulting. And some people just need a couple of visits with us, Zoom calls like this, because there are a lot of people that want to do forest schooling or wild schooling. I mean, there's all kind of little buzzwords out there. And there are a lot of people that they just want to put a group of people together and go to a park and do some type of learning at a park. So we have branched out on that. And our goal is to have a One Acre Farm or to have a curriculum that we can eventually sell to people, maybe some videos, our consulting. We would love, I think and I'll let Nicole expand on this too. I think we would love to somehow become a connector of people that have the skills of teaching but may not have the land, and then people that have land but don't have the skills, because
Yeah, it's a great idea. Yeah.
we're just very unique, that we are very fortunate to have One Acre Farm, and we're both teachers. So we've been very fortunate that we had that. But there's got to be people out there that say, man, I've got all this land, I have these animals, but I don't know how to teach, but I would love to let somebody come on my ranch or my small farm and teach. And then there's got to be teachers out there that are like, oh, I want to do this, I want to teach stuff, but I don't have any land or animals. So I think, Nicole, would you agree that that's one of the ways we want to go?
The people who reach out to us are usually either farmers and like, how do you do this on an acre with your animals? I don't really know how to teach. And so then they want the curriculum type thing. And then we've got teachers that reach out. They're like, oh my gosh, I could totally teach this. I love this, but I just don't have the space. And so like she said, we're unique in that we had both. We've got the farmer background and we're teachers, and we had the acre to work it on. But yeah, connecting the two. And I think we're now at a point in time in America where people are more willing to do something like that. I think before COVID, this would not have gone over well.
Yeah, I agree.
The decline we're seeing in profits that small farmers are making, specifically small farmers. I'm not talking commercial. I'm talking small 50 acre, 10 acre, 5 acre farms. To be able to have that income come in of X amount per month, that, okay, I lease this 1 acre portion of my land and I get that per month. That's great. And then the teachers be able to go, I can leave this, full-time institutionalized job that I hate now and go and create this thing and do it for less hours, a more intentional program outdoors. So and we're seeing that across Facebook groups and people we talk to. This is something that people are looking for all over the country, not just Texas. It's happening all over. And so
have you got some projects that you've put together now where you've put those people together with land and teaching skills and seen them move?
Not yet. We've done some consultations that two specifically did go ahead and start their programs, and they've been very successful. One is we did a consult with someone who is in Idaho, and she does her Montessori classroom out of a yurt, and that was really cool. And then another one, she's specifically more of homeschool educational classes. She'll do like a 6 to 8 week rotation in classes, and that's gone off really well with her. And so, yeah, that's been cool to see those start. And those people just needed the encouragement to do it. That, a lot of people, the people that are ready to jump on this just need to hear that they're not crazy and that you're on the right track. People will sign up. People do want this. It's okay. And so going back to the loneliness aspect, once you can connect with people and tell them we're all in the same boat. Like this is pioneer this, even though you have nobody in your area that's doing this, just do it. And because both these people already had land, that they were in a similar situation with us where they were just able to start it. But the connecting the two different types of people is something we'd like to be able to do in the future.
What about mobile 1 acre farms? What about being able to, pack your 1 acre farm in a trailer and then take it onto a school campus?
I actually
Catherine
did
said
that.
before.
I did that for years. That's exactly what I did before. I mean, I would have a few classes and workshops at the farm, but no, it was very lucrative too. And so I had a flatbed trailer and I built this red frame structure around it to make it look like a barn, and it just said
like a sort of
barn.
tiny house on the back of your pickup.
Yeah, exactly. And I'd put all the animals in there.
Oh, what a great idea.
And I did. And so I got paid I did a few birthday parties, but that really wasn't that's not my gig. So I marketed myself to all of the preschools and daycares around. And so I would go and set up for several hours and they would rotate all their classes through. And I gave like a 30-minute demonstration and I talked about the chickens and the rabbits. And so it wasn't a petting zoo at all. It was very educational. And then I got a contract with the local school district to do it. And so I was going to all of the elementary schools. And it was so labor intensive. It was at least 2 hours of prep, loading animals, making sure we had water and food. And again, because of our heat and humidity down here, watching and caring for the animals' health in these parking lots while I'm doing this, and then loading them back up, coming home and unloading. I burned out really, really quickly. I would have done it for, if it weren't for what I'm about to lead into, I probably would have kept with it. But my mother ended up having a stroke, and very debilitating and paralyzed. She couldn't move. She couldn't talk anymore. And we were in this, middle class limbo where we couldn't afford full-time care to help. So I became her caregiver.
Right.
And so I ended up having to shut that down. I just had to sell off about half of my animals. I didn't want to get rid of all of them. But I bring up her stroke because her doctor had explained to me, he said, please work with her every day. Help her learn how to feed herself again. Help her learn how to talk again. And so he gave this visual of so I'm here in Texas. So between Houston and Dallas is the highway called 45. And he said, if you want to get from Houston to Dallas, you would normally take I-45, but the road is blocked. Now you can't. So now you got to go all these little country roads. Might take longer, but you can still get from Houston to Dallas, but you're just going to have to go down these other paths. That's what you're doing with your mother's brain. This part of her brain is destroyed, but you can retrain it and create these new paths. So all of that happened. And then we meet you and we learn the science behind movement method and what happens with a child's brain that may have autism, and about forming pathways and neuroplasticity and all of that. So all of those life experiences that I had that brought me then to meeting you in movement method have just now fast forwarded to where we are and what we're doing.
If you're a horse nerd, and if you're on this podcast, I'm guessing you are, then you've probably also always wondered a little bit about the old master's system of dressage training. If you go and check out our Helios Harmony program, we outline there step by step exactly how to train your horse from the ground to become the dressage horse of your dreams in a way that absolutely serves the physical, mental, and emotional well-being of the horse and the rider. Intrigued? Like to know more? Go to our website, heliosharmony.com. Check out the free introduction course. Take it from there.
I wonder if it might be possible. I'm just thinking, obviously of you guys, but I'm also thinking about other people who might be listening who are thinking, well, I'd like to do something like this, but I'm already maxed out, with the program I've got. And I think that's very much the experience of pretty much anyone who runs any of these programs, unless somebody comes in and with a big checkbook and says, all right, you're now able to hire all this staff. Because then even if you do, then suddenly you are the administrator and you are now doing that full time. So you might expand your capacity, but in terms of your own personal time, you are as stretched as you ever were, if not more. But what I was wondering, listening to your story about going around, because we used to do this from our New Trails ranch, we would also put the horses in trailers and go onto school campuses and so on. And but we'd take the other animals and then we'd run some lessons. And I know some of the other horse boy movement method people have done it too. I think if I was in your shoes, though, is it possible to almost outsource that? Could you find people that you don't have to pay directly, but you could train and say, okay, I will set you up with the clientele. You could go out to the schools that say, who wants this, or the homeschooling groups who can't come to you. And then you say, all right, this person have gone through a training. Now your job is to load up the animals, go there, blah, 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 blah. This is what you need. You're going to need to be under a big tree because of the heat, the blah, blah, blah. You're going to need this, you're going to need that, you're going to need the other, this. And then they go off and deliver that while you continue, but you don't have to necessarily pay them directly. They are an independent contractor that gets paid, and then they just give you, a small percentage of that daily fee. But then perhaps at a certain point you have 10 of those people going out, and then that becomes enough money to fund some more construction or staff members on property, but it also expands your reach. Could one do it sort of that way?
I've never thought about it, but I think that's something certainly to put thought to. Yes.
Because there are people out there with a vehicle and people without, and it might be that they could just, they can't put the full farm in there. They can't do, that very whimsical thing on the back of a pickup truck, but they might be able to put two chickens and a dog in the back of the thing and go and deliver really meaningful curriculum that way. And the reason I think about chickens is we have a really wonderful place here in Germany, the Green Care Farm up in Munster. And they go out to schools as well as having schools come to them. And they got a call to go in where there'd been a threat of, luckily it didn't materialize, but of a school shooting, which is very, very rare for this part of the world. And it was because of complications between Ukrainian and Russian and Syrian and Iraqi refugee families. It blew up and the kids were pretty traumatized. And they took the farm into the school. And they said that the thing that really got the kids was the chickens. Somehow the following of the chickens, the organizing of the chickens, the social stuff that chickens go through, that they aren't always so nice to each other, as you know. But yet they always kind of work it out. That the idea that there's a tangible product, there's the egg, there's the meat, there's the feather, you can do these things with it. And at the same time, it's so full of personality. And it's such a simple thing to do, a chicken, a small group of chickens. So I'm just wondering if I might put that out there to you and to anyone else who's listening. Has anyone else been doing that? Or if you decide to do that, I'd love to hear a report. Yeah.
To my knowledge, I don't think there was anyone else. I mean, certainly there are petting zoos that set up its petting zoos, but I don't think there was anyone that was doing it like we were as far as education. So right. I know if I put thought to that, there would be an immediate source of clientele that would want that done.
Okay. Well, maybe you would work on that.
That would not be hard to organize at all.
And it might even be the sort of thing that you get like a working student to come in. Maybe that's somebody who wants to come and add this to their CV, to their resume, and they're coming in from abroad or they're coming in from another state, and they're maybe in between doing their school and college or between their BA and their MA or whatever, and they want to, and you can say to that person, okay, you go off and handle that. You can drive, you're good with animals. I'll give you this training. You go off and handle that. and that money will be largely yours. We just need a small percentage of it or whatever. Yeah.
Mhm. Very doable.
Mm.
I'm
Always
taking
thinking.
notes.
Yes. One thing we haven't talked about, this podcast is Equine-Assisted World, and you guys, do have equines on the property. One of the things I obviously like to do when I'm training people and talking to people is to tell them, while I want you to train your horses really, really well, I also don't want you to be too horse focused, because not every kid is into horses. They can't be on horses, the entire day, most of the time. So what are you doing with the rest of that time? But you guys have actually answered what are you doing with the rest of that time so admirably. Talk to us a little bit about the equine side of what you do.
Oddly enough, even though that was going to be the start of our focus when we started with the autism therapy sessions, it greatly and very quickly moved to more of the smaller animals and the livestock. A lot of times the kids that we come can be intimidated by a larger horse. So at the time when we started, we had Nicole's horse and her sister's horse, and one was an Arabian and one was a quarter horse. No, they were both quarter horses.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, Arab and a quarter, yeah.
Okay. And so we started with them, and then a lot of the kids just didn't really even have that much interest in the horses. They immediately wanted to go be with the bunnies or be with the chickens. And I found myself like, well, no, wait, there's horses right here. Don't you want to be with the horses? That are like, no, we want to do this. And so with our philosophy of following the child, and so then that became more of the method that was being used with the kids. So now we do have a pony, a Welsh pony, and she's not fully trained, but I do train her in the horse boy method. And we have a couple of kids that are interested in her, but we also have a little mini horse, a white, I don't know, he's like 32 inches tall and solid white. His name is Gus, and he's a very good introduction to horses because he's so small. And because he's white, we've allowed kids to paint on him like a big piece of paper. And so currently right now with the clients that we have, I have only one student that wants to do any back riding on Honey, on our Welsh pony. So right now they're not being utilized as I thought they would in the beginning of the conception of this.
I will add though, even though they're not being ridden, the students that need the horse time get their horse time. But
Right.
like she was saying, we gravely overestimated how important the horses were going to be to the children. And now there are certain ones that's Honey, the Welsh pony, is the first one they go and say hi to, and they bring her treats every morning, or so there are those that go and talk to the horses and pet them, and that's really important to them. But the majority of our kids find the rabbits, the goats, the chickens to be their place. And so it really just depends. So they're there and they assist the kids that need it, but for the most part it's the small animals that carry carry the weight of the kids. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I find these things go in a sort of seasonal thing almost, like in the course of our own practice, just my own home practice here in Germany. I find that it goes really up and down the number of hours or kids that are really, really horse focused. And sometimes I go through like a semester where it's really almost not about the horses at all. Or maybe we're just using the horses to get to a certain area of the forest where the kids want to play and explore. And actually, they're quite happy to walk there. They like having the horses with, but they appreciate having the horse to get back. So you've got to get back up the hill from the creek or whatever. And that's when they want to sit on the horse and ride. And then they'll often really interact, say, oh, I love this. I love the riding. But their focus is not there. And I can see what they get from it neurologically. And I can see how the oxytocin gets them communicating and speaking. And then there'll be another semester where it's like all about the horses. And I have kids that want to learn how to train horses from the ground, and they're doing piaffe and passage, and and then another semester comes, it's sort of not about the horses again. What do you talk to me about that kind of flexibility of follow the child? Because this is very, you're a horsey person, Nicole, and you know that this is actually one of the difficulties about the horsey personality is we're so horse focused, we can actually have a bit of trouble moving away from that if that's not where the person is at. Talk to us about that learning curve that you've gone through.
Yeah, I think now we've both just kind of accepted it. I think at the beginning it was a little bit harder. And also I remember being a child and being so obsessed with everything about horses that I think, how can you've got a horse right in front of you? How can you not just want to do everything about this? But really, I think once you just get to this point where you can let go of you being the one in control, I mean, it's less about, I think it's less about the horse aspect, but just once you can let go of, this is not about me. This is about what the kids want, and the kids are telling you what they want. Once you can get to that point, then everything else becomes easier. And so, as much as the horses are, lesser utilized than some of the other animals on the farm, most of our visitors, when they come, even though they're not riding or doing anything in particular, Honey goes up and greets every kid that comes in. She'll walk right up to the gate. The kids pet her when they come in. So horses are still kind of and she, tells them bye when they leave, because her pen is right where the kids enter and exit for the school day. And so even though they might not be directly interacting with her in the way that we see, she is still the start and the end to their day, which is really cool. And the kids, everybody who visits, whether it's, not specifically farm school, but other classes or events that Catherine puts on, Honey is the one that the kids talk about because she's right there where all the activities are. So I think just once we let go of that feeling that, oh my gosh, we need to get the horses more involved in this, and just, it's okay. Like, the horses are there for the kids who need it, but it just didn't have to be this, our whole program didn't have to be wrapped around it.
Yeah, it's so hard for horsey personalities because, as you say, we're so obsessed. We can't imagine that other people aren't. And then we almost become a bit evangelical. No, but surely you want the horse, It's like, and they're like, well, yeah, well, not really. I'm like, really? Well, how can that be? And I think that there is a personality type that goes with being horsey that is a bit controlling. I mean, I think you have to be a bit bossy to be good with horses, because you have to have that slightly leadershipy, bossy side that horses themselves actually often have. And I agree with you. I think letting that go is the hardest skill to learn. At what point for both of you, because you Catherine, for a while you were involved in a fairly controlled and controlling side of Christianity, and it sounds like also, listening to the story of your childhood and the ups and the downs, there must have been a desire for control, to find order in chaos. And I think a lot of us that end up with slightly controlling personalities, it's often in response to chaotic events, and trying to find that kind of sense of safety. I'd like both of you just to talk a little bit about your own journeys with how you managed to kind of give up the obsession with control, because I think this is something that is an absolute must for anyone who's going to do our kind of work. And it comes as a bit of a surprise, I think, as you say, for a lot of people that, I'm going to set up an equine-assisted program, and say, yeah, but what if the person's not really into it? So Catherine, how did you give that up?
I don't know if it was a giving up or if it was just an evolution and growing and moving on. I think at the time in my life when there was that much structure and rules, there was probably some type of comfort there because it does give you structure, and it does give you a bubble of protection. And then
a sense of security.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely it does. And I would never speak on that. I mean, I chose that life. So there were great benefits to that, and a great love and faith to my creator and God in that. But I think as my mind grew, it wasn't growing out of not wanting to have a faith in him, but I grew beyond the structure of the boundaries, and just began to see the world through a different filter than just the filter of those rules. And so then my filter, and I'll just go back to it, just truly became about kindness and seeing every individual for being a human being, who they are, and that every person has intrinsic value, and that every person has intelligence. And especially in working with kids with autism, something that that I learned through you, but I think I'd already had that thought in my mind, is that to just always assume intelligence, always assume there is, while a person may not be able to verbalize and communicate in a certain way, that we never devalue what is in their mind and their soul. And so I think while I did leave some tenets of organized religion behind, I didn't leave my faith behind, and I just grew more in my acceptance and unconditional love of people, and truly tried to impart that to the kids that are here, and just find a balance. I guess maybe I feel like now I just have a balance in life with that.
Nicole.
Yeah, I think a lot of that changed for me during my time at the ABA clinic, because that was a highly controlled environment. Every minute of the kids' day were planned out, and while that can seem beneficial to someone who's more controlling in their personality, or just the sense of control, eases your mind, I saw how quickly it wasn't working. And that in the process of, okay, we might have these kids under control, but we're also breaking their spirit because we're taking all of that away from them. So I very quickly just started to realize this is not how you work with children. And by switching to Montessori, and then really taking your control out of it, you can prepare the environment, prepare the materials, but really you let go of control, and then it's okay, let the kids go and let them teach you. And so having that realization of let go of the control and observe, and then watch the kids flourish. So it was about a year's time where I really felt like this deep change in my teaching heart, I guess. And so now, once that happened, then it's like, okay, let them do stuff. And I mean, I still have my moments. I might cringe a little bit when they mix the Play-Doh colors together, but I don't say anything. So it's yeah, that sort of thing. I mean, you still feel it, but
Oh my
you have
gosh.
to know that this is fine. So
Yeah. And that can sometimes be the biggest atrocity of the day. At the end of the day, when we're cleaning up, we're like, oh my God, the Play-Doh colors are mixed up. So I actually gave to some of my kids, because we've got modeling clay in the elementary, and I gave one of them, I said, here's your job. Somebody mixed up all these balls. I need you to separate the colors out. And they did. They were happy to do it.
Yeah, I mean, there you go. There's an opportunity right there. There's a learning opportunity right there. But and then one has to get over. First, you've got to have your reaction. Oh my God, this is God. And then you look back and think, oh my God, I wasted like a month of reactions before I thought, why don't I just give it to the kids to sort out? That's it.
Right.
Oh, yeah. We're so interesting, aren't we, humans? And I guess it all comes down to fear. But you were talking about the quote, "Let children do dangerous things safely." I found that actually with Jordan Peterson.
Oh, that's who said it.
Okay.
Yes, that's right. I should have known that.
But it is very true that if you grow up on a farm, you're going to handle blades, machines, livestock. And it's so interesting with my three kids. I've watched them all going through it. Touch wood, they don't tend to cut themselves because you're constantly with them, sort of showing them what to do. They observe you cutting yourself. They sort of don't want to repeat that. Occasionally they give themselves a small nick or so on, but doesn't everybody have the right to do that? Then of course it's very different when it's my kids as opposed to somebody else's kids. So when we've got people coming onto the farm, obviously we do our best to make sure that the quote unquote dangerous stuff is not just lying around and so on and so on. But we also make it very clear that we cannot and will not control every moment. But what we will do is try to provide mentorship and leadership, because at a certain point the kids are going to need to learn how to handle fire or a blade or a tool of some sort. And it's interesting. Temple Grandin is big on this. She says you've got to let kids work out the technologies, the physical technologies, not the software technologies of life, if you want them to be able to order later things, which means they've got to make some mistakes, which means but isn't it interesting how much fewer mistakes with the big M they seem to make if they're allowed to make a lot of mistakes with small M's. Have you not
Yes.
found that?
Yeah, well, and even just thinking back and teaching at other schools, I was writing out incident reports multiple times a day for injuries and things that were happening.
Yeah.
And now we don't have injuries and things that happen at the farm. Now, the first few weeks when children come, we'll get bumps and bruises and somebody gets hit by the swing because they're not used to where it is. That happens. But after that, we don't deal with injuries and stuff. I mean, occasionally we'll have things come up, but because kids are allowed to try and take the risk, because typically at more, playground settings, they're jumping off of higher things because they're bored. They're so controlled and you can't go up the slide. And, so
And they're boiling over with energy.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
Overwhelms their thought process because they've been sat still for so long. Yeah.
Right. And so here, because there's freedom within boundaries and reasonable boundaries. And so once they learn where those reasonable boundaries are, very quickly they're able to just go and do their thing. And we don't have the same amount of injuries and nicks and bruises that I saw at a typical school setting.
What about?
Well, we talked about earlier about giving them skills. So for example, when October and November comes around and we get people that are donating their pumpkins that have been out, in their decorations, we'll get, I don't know, one year we got over 100 pumpkins or something. So we have pumpkin smashing at school. And so we don't just say, here, go at it. We show them proper handling, the way you hold a hammer, and we say you can use the blunt end or you can use the hook end, but when you swing, be aware of where your legs are. You don't want your feet together because if you swing, you might hit your shin. And so we go through this lecture of safety, and then we usually give them a hula hoop. So each child is inside of a hula hoop with their pumpkin, and hula hoops have to be so far away. And then after they've been given the instructions and the skills, then they're able to go at it, and they're just smashing those pumpkins. And you wouldn't normally think you would allow 25 kids to be smashing pumpkins.
Yeah. What about things like firewood, using an axe to split wood, saw, knives for whittling, or all of that sort of thing, which of course there's no way in any school anyone's going to let you do.
Those are usually reserved for the elementary kids. Now, both the early childhood and the elementary both have campfires, and we go through campfire training and safety and all of that stuff. But oddly enough, here in Texas, we only have maybe a week or 2 weeks where we are that you can actually have a fire because we're summertime most of the time. The kids, now that they've been through a whole half of a year, now the elementary kids will be doing more with more tools because we want to give them more time on learning self-control, because while they have freedom, that age group can still be really squirrely and everything. And so when we can trust them to have some self-control is when we'll introduce some of that.
Talk to me about bullying. So I've generally noticed that in these outdoor environments, you tend not to really see it unless it's something that's being brought from a regular classroom out into the natural thing, because the kids are just not in nature that often. So in their minds, they're still sort of back in the playground politics. Talk to us about, you've both been in the public school system, plenty of bullying. Talk to us about that, or the lack of that, at 1 Acre Farm, and if it's a lack of it, what do you attribute that to?
You want me to start?
You'd start, and then I'll,
okay.
Yeah.
Usually where we see it come in, now we don't deal with a bullying issue at school, and that's even with having a wide range of children and very diverse backgrounds of children. So yeah, with that all in play, we don't deal with it. The only time we've had issues come in is, like you just said, when we have a kid coming in from the public school system, and they come in and that's just like their operating motive, because they just think, I got to survive and that's what I got to do. And then it's October, November, December, we see that all wane because they realize, okay, I'm a part of this community and I don't need to fight this. I don't need to hold my own. Like, there are people looking out for me. I have friends who, and they quickly learn too, that doesn't work with the social dynamics here. If I start talking like that, nobody wants to play with me. And so there is that natural part of it that we let play out, because we're not going to tell their kids, oh, hey, you have to play with so-and-so because that's what we do. If somebody doesn't want to play with you, well, why do you think they don't want to play with you? Did you knock down their castle? Did you go and stomp on their mud tower? Did you tell them, whatever? So there's a ton of conversations that happen between teachers and kids. And then eventually our goal is later in the year is that the kids are having those conversations and they're not having to come to the teachers anymore to help, lead that conversation. So the first few months, there is a lot of that. Oh, so-and-so said this to me. So-and-so hurt my feelings. So-and-so said this. And then we get the two together, we help them talk it out, and then they go back to play. And so we don't do, like, there's no timeouts, there's no taking recess away, there's nothing like that. Now, if you're being unsafe, that's where we do have the boundaries get bumped up then. If you're being unsafe with an animal, or if you're being unsafe with a kid, well, then we have to take some privileges away. You can't go in the animal pen by yourself because you're being unsafe. You can't go over there where I can't see you as well because you're being unsafe. So once they learn my privileges get taken away, they quickly kind of change course. And so it's been very rare that we've had issues last beyond a few weeks. It tends to right itself pretty quickly. I would say when we do tours, especially with the age group I work with, that is a question of about 30 to 50% of my parents that walk through. They ask about bullying and how the social dynamics are here. So it is something, it tells me, like, even it's so prevalent that even before kids are school age, like, parents are already thinking about this. And so that's something that we really want to strive. We want to provide a peaceful environment for these kids here, but we also want them to be able to have enough freedom to work out. You know what? I said that way, and that didn't work out. And now that kid doesn't want to play with me. So there's that expectation of kindness, but also you have enough freedom that you can try things and then learn from your mistakes. So, but that's a hard boundary to teach. And it's something that even as it comes up in real time, sometimes as teachers, we have to talk about, how are we going to handle this? Because it's not a black and white, oh, you said this, now this is a consequence type of deal. Because that's how life is. Everything is so dynamic day to day. And so we just try and approach it with an attitude of solving it as best as possible and keeping a peaceful environment.
Now, with the ages of 7 to 10, there's an elevation of maturity there, and that age group is very much more competitive and segregate themselves. Now we've got the boy-girl dynamic going on, boys against girls, that kind of stuff. And again, the ones that come in from a public school situation will be the bullies. This age group tends to very much appreciate if I treat them as the growing up adults that they are. And I will tell them that. I'm like, if you're going to act like a baby, then I may have to treat you like a baby, but I want to treat you like the growing up adult that you are becoming. And so I have expectations of you. And they like the way that we teach in the elementary class is very Socratic. So it's not just me standing up and talking. It's a circle, and it's very discussion oriented and interactive with them. And they like talking through this kind of stuff. I can tell you that is my short fuse. And if you want to see Miss Catherine blow a gasket, it will be to do something to an animal, like kick dirt on a rabbit or poke a stick at a goat. Oh, Nicole will have to hold me back from wanting to annihilate a kid. I mean, I have to watch my temper on that. And then the other one is bullying or saying anything negative to somebody. Because you'll hear kids say, ew, you had that in your lunch. Oh, that's so gross. I don't like that. And so then I try to use that as a teaching opportunity that people have different tastes, people have different whatevers. With the ages 7 to 10, we use a lot of object lessons. If I start to see that the kids are getting really catty in how they talk to each other and the whatevers and that kind of stuff, I will usually try to take a child aside and just talk to them. Hey, what's going on? Where did you learn to talk like that or something? And or how do you think that makes the other person feel? But then we'll do object lessons. I won't address the whole group and say, okay, we're having a bullying problem. Let's talk about it. I'll just make some kind of community group activity that we have to do that fosters teamwork, or some type of object lesson the first one I usually use at the beginning of every school year when they start getting that way is about with a tube of toothpaste. And I think a lot of teachers have used this. Like, okay, let's see how fast. We have two teams, and they have to squeeze the toothpaste out as fast as they can into the plate. And who was the fastest to get the toothpaste out? And they're screaming for each other and all of that. And then I'm like, okay, I have a dollar bill right here. Who can get the toothpaste back into the tube? And then they're looking at, they're like, now some of the smart ones will be like, well, let's cut it open and put it back in. And I'm like, no, you got to get it back in the same way it came out. And so it goes through this whole thing. And so then the gist of that lesson at the end is like, well, that's like your words. It is so easy for you to get words out. But once they're out, you can't put them back in. So be very, very careful and mindful of the words that you put out. And so every year, the kids that have been here before, they're like, when are we doing the toothpaste? So for that age group, I try to use object lessons. And a lot of times I'll get on Google and be like, object lessons for being kind to one another. And I'll get ideas from that.
I mean, so much of this really comes down to I think all schools go through this, and all education, all places go through this. It's the culture really comes from the top down, right? I mean, if your main focus is kindness rather than equestrian skills or this therapy, or if you say no, let's just start with kindness, then the other stuff will fall into a category and a framework of kindness. But if we say, let's start with equestrian skills, or let's start with an idea of a particular therapeutic outcome or an academic outcome, then kindness might be sidelined in relation to that. So I really take my hat off to you guys. And, for listeners who think, well, maybe that sounds a bit too good to be true, it isn't. I've gone out there and over years seen what Catherine and Nicole do. And it's not just impressive, it's quite unique, and we need more of it. So, and it's successful. That's the thing. I've just seen you constantly achieve success. So you guys are mentors, and that's really why I want you on the show. We've sort of gone over the 2-hour mark, so we should wrap up. How do people contact you? If they want consultations, if they want to learn, if they want to put their own 1 acre farm together, if they want to know, the ideas for lesson plans and so on, whether it's homeschooling or regular schooling, just talk us through how they can contact you.
Well, if they go to the website, which is www. And this is all spelled out, 1acrefarmtx.com. So that's ONEACREFARMTX.com. Well, then we have a contact page where they can send us an email. If they want to speak specifically about early childhood, Nicole's email is on there. Elementary, my email is on there. And then our phone number is there. So if they're in the US, they can also text us. And then we are on Facebook also as 1 Acre Farm TX on Facebook. So those are probably the major ways that they can get in contact with us.
Fantastic.
Or here, I'll put out the number now. So if they want to text us, it's 832.
832.
My phone's going to blow up now.
Yeah.
832-860-4756. And it's kind of
Say
funny.
that one more time, just so people are grabbing their pens.
Yes. 832-860-4756. I can tell you if you call, it will go to voicemail because I can very rarely answer my phone. And in the voicemail, it will tell you, please text me. Because if you text, I can usually shoot out a quick text and say, hey, let's make a phone appointment or something.
And you have WhatsApp on that number too?
Oh, yes, I do.
Yeah.
Yes. So if they have a WhatsApp, then
to.
internationally, they can get me through there. Yes.
Super. Okay. Then listen, guys, I think we should have you back at a later date to go into some further things about specific, teaching specifics in specific ways and so on.
Yeah.
But it's been an absolute delight to have you on. And I just look forward to seeing more and more of the same successes and watching you guys grow. And my ideal would be, yeah, if there's 1 acre farm in every neighborhood.
Thank you. I would love that as a vision. It's been a joy. Thank you for having us, Rupert.
Well,
Thank you very much.
thank you, Nicole. Thank you, Catherine. We'll see you next time.
Yes.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed today's conversation as much as I did. If you like what we're doing here, please do like, subscribe, tell a friend. It so helps us to get this valuable work done and the message of equine-assisted stuff out there. And if you're interested in more conversations, you might want to check out our Live Free, Ride Free podcast. And if you'd like to support the podcasts, please go to rupertisaacson.com and click on the Patreon link. If you're a professional in the equine-assisted field or are considering a career in the equine-assisted field, you might want to check out our 3 certification programs: Horseboy Method, Movement Method, and Taquine Equine Integration. You can find all of those over on newtrailslearning.com. And finally, if you want to check out our cool rock and roll themed merch, back on rupertisaacson.com, please click on shop. You'll find all kinds of fun goodies there. And if you're looking for a way to spend time until the next podcast, you might want to consider reading the books that kicked all this off: The Horseboy, The Long Ride Home, and The Healing Land. So see you next time on Equine Assisted World. Join us for the adventure.